the actors, he had makeup on his head to start with for one scene, and then as we went to the next scene, then he had this kind of it wasn't really blood, it was syrup, but it was sort of a like a black syrup, and he had that applied to his head by the makeup artist. Well, if the shot didn't go well, then basically you've got to redo everything again, all of the makeup.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
everything's a risk. You know.
I saw the We Belong Dead magazine advertisement that you put out there with The Shining in it, and I was curious about the magazine just in general, and then you ended up with your own column in that. How did that end up happening?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so We Belong Dead is mainly a classic horror magazine. So going back to any time from silent movies onwards, really. It does have more modern things in it as well. I think there is generally a cut-off time. I'm not sure what Eric, the editor's got it at the minute. It might be sort of late 80s. There might be a few things beyond that, but it's mainly sort of slightly older horror.
Hmm.
And yeah, I got involved because I know Eric. I know him from the horror scene. I've known Eric for years. He just said to me one time, "Do you fancy writing a column?" So I was like, "Yeah, why not? Be amazing." And that's the second time I've written a column for another magazine, digital filmmaker magazine, but that was quite different. Obviously, it was about film and filmmaking, not really films like horror films and stuff like that. So, and my column there was more technical advice on filmmaking. Whereas I might offer that if someone asks me, I will respond to that in my column. So I have a little bit of a Q&A section in there, but it's more talking about horror films, what I've been up to, my projects as well, that kind of thing really, and sort of lots of strange, bizarre facts I've been strange link ups of
It's really
things.
cool because I definitely want to check it out because we all know Fangoria if we're fans of horror, but it's really cool to see and not only just an alternate rag, but an alternate rag that focuses on movies that Fangoria doesn't really focus on. So I mean, when you was talking about older horror, and I imagine with British horror as well, does it focus like on some of the Hammer stuff too?
Oh yeah, a big focus on Hammer and other kind of films in that time. I mean, the thing is that the kind of readership and fan base and viewership, obviously, for those films, it never really dies. The classics, and there's
Yeah,
lots of people
yeah,
that still
yeah.
love them. And you could probably write about them in every magazine. You could probably fill a whole magazine full of just Hammer stuff, and people would love that and want
Yeah.
to read it. So
Like you read it one time and then just frame it on your wall. Like, yeah, like
yeah,
I'm
why not? If there's a nice.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
I'm totally that way when it comes to Hammer stuff. I used to have a whole lot of different things when I lived in America, but I live in Germany now, and I showed up with a guitar and a suitcase. um, as far as making film goes, um, when you decided to pull the trigger to really, really go
oh.
for it, and was it just kind of picking up a camera and shooting some stuff here and there, and then just kind of fixing it in post, or did you have formal education?
No, I didn't go to film school, but I have on and off done filmmaking stuff for years. Not necessarily my own kind of genre pieces, stuff for clients. Slightly more boring, but yeah, I've done that on and off for a number of years. But when it came to actually making a genre short film, at my first film season, I didn't shoot that myself. I did have other people shoot that, but it was very much trial and error. And there certainly were things that had to be fixed in post. Although not so much with putting effects over things. Although there were a couple of really minor things. One of the actors, for example, as they kind of got up from a fight scene and they were walking away, or running or crawling away, you could see a brand label on their underpants. I know that's a bit random, but yeah, it's kind of better to remove if somebody's not sponsored something, you
Yeah.
don't really want a brand label prominently. So there were like really minor things like that that had to be corrected.
Hmm.
But a lot of it was more in the edit. So fight scenes are quite difficult to shoot and edit. And there were places where if I could have gone back again for a third time shooting in the same location, I would have gone back and you know shot a couple bits more footage and kind of cut that in. But you can't necessarily, especially with low budget filmmaking. And you're relying on people to have free time to let you into the location. You
Hmm.
certainly can't get. I mean, that was in a garage, for example, a working garage. If we'd gone back again, it's quite difficult to get the filler shots if things change around you, like there are different cars and things there. Sometimes people won't pick up on that, but sometimes continuity can be a little bit more obvious for viewers. So
Hmm. When it comes to the
yeah,
continuity, it's just when you got to keep referring to that shot list. I over the
yeah.
I suppose over COVID is a good time to put it. I began writing a script to myself. Actually, I wrote a full script, and
Mhm.
I began doing the shot listing and everything. And I was checking out different. I was doing shot scouting in different locations and things like that. And then full on the COVID hit, and when nobody could go out and do anything, I decided to go ahead and turn it into a book.
A
And
book
Okay,
scripting.
yeah.
the book actually became an audio book, and I'm about to make the fourth episode, and it's really cool to see. I don't know, this new crop of indie directors coming up when it comes to horror and stuff like that. I mean, I was brought up on 80s horror, Full Moon and stuff like that. It's like my entire like childhood, and seeing everybody come from different places when it comes to their different horror influences, and then converge into making new film. It's one of the best parts I think about, as art progresses and stuff like that. Is there one kind of inspiration that always shows up in something that you're writing or working on, no matter what? You're like, you have to kind of always give that little nod.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you said, as you start writing something, things kind of build on top of that, don't you? As you get inspired. I really like the idea you're saying you've turned your film into a book because I
Yeah.
do think that's another option. If you've written a lot of different portfolio pieces and you can't make them all because it does take a lot of money, time, and effort to make a film, even if it's a short film. I think it's quite a nice idea to put it into a book, and then if you come round to it later, or if you get budgeted independently from it, your book's out there, and you can work from that for your script. So I do quite like that idea, and I think that is a good idea.
Well, the thing is with writing a book is there's no budgetary restrictions. Like when you're writing the script, you have to
Mm.
worry about what you can actually pull off or what's going to be CGI, or that kind of thing. The reason I asked about what your inspirations were that you always kind of give a nod to is
Mm.
because there's people that prefer special effects and there's people that prefer CGI.
Mm.
And by seeing where someone draws a lot of their initial inspiration from, it's really cool to see how they'll give nods when it comes to stuff like that. Like, for example, Tom Savini.
Mm.
And would you say that when it comes to special effects, you rely more on practical or CGI?
It is kind of like, six of one, half a dozen of another, to be honest. It would be great to have everything practical,
Mm-hmm.
but some visual effects are needed, really.
Yeah.
There's things you can't do
Mm-hmm.
practically. I would if it's something like a monster or something like that. It's better to do it practically.
Right.
And saying that, so in my film Season Night, obviously it's werewolves versus vampires. Vampires are very easy. You just stick a pair of fangs in, and that's all you really need to do. But when it comes to werewolves, obviously, there could be potentially quite a lot of makeup involved.
Yeah.
And I had one of my special effects guys. They had this full werewolf suit and everything, and it did look great in still images. But then when we came
Mm-hmm.
to film this scene with the werewolf in, which was going to be in like 50% shadow to kind of hide the suit a little bit, so you're just seeing, the face and a bit of the body shape. It did not work at all. Although it did look great for still images, it just didn't work for video. It wasn't good enough really for that. So that's why the only actual werewolf you see, which is it's not a visual effect, it is a shadow, and that is the shadow of the person in the suit, kind of cast on the wall. And I had to basically just run with that really. And I mean, I could have said, perhaps we should create, a CGI werewolf or something, or a CGI overlay, but that's a lot. That's a lot of work for somebody to do that for a very low budget short film. So
Right. Right.
yeah, yeah, and so I would like tend to go practical,
Mm-hmm.
but there are a lot of visual effects that you won't actually see. So kind of like overlays on things, subtle things in there. That's more kind of where I go in my direction for the visual effects. But if somebody does that well, it's
I think
fantastic.
that there's some people who are they're just purists when it comes to not using digital effects, and it's you get well. There's two things. Number one, not all of us have the Stan Winston budget. we we can't hire an entire warehouse to take care of our special effects needs. And then the secondary one is with digital effects, it's the same thing as when you're writing a book. I suppose you no longer have those budgetary restraints. As long as you have someone that can do it right, make it look right, and I don't know, you approve of it, and obviously it passes through your quality filter. I think that digital effects can be a honest to God blessing for independent artists, especially when it comes to making horror, because gore is not easy to replicate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's something to be said about the digital blood splatter, though. It doesn't always look great. I think it's quite difficult to do blood digitally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so practically, it is better. But then on the other hand, if you've got a scene and you're working with a low budget and you've got one chance to get the shot right and you're using stage blood,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that you've basically, you've got to clean up the area to reset. You might not have time
Yeah,
to do
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I understand why people would use it, but it is quite difficult to get CG blood right.
I completely understand, and that's actually something that the horror genre has to deal with specifically when it comes to our craft. Well, I've never made a horror movie, but the craft of horror movies is because we have to deliver when it comes to horror. Romance, you can have a little
Mm.
gore in there and stuff if it's a war picture, that kind of thing. But when it's a horror movie, people come for one thing. They come to be scared, get their adrenaline up, and then leave and know that it was a safe experience the whole time, but you want to trick them into the whole time into being like, this isn't a movie. And like you said, CGI gore can be difficult to do. It seems to be getting better and better throughout time. And you really have my sympathies when it comes to having to do a live shot of special effects of blood, do the whole shot, and then clean everything up.
Exactly. It's really difficult, even if it's not that. For Salient Minus 10, for example, one of the actors, he had makeup on his head to start with for one scene. And then as we went to the next scene, then he had this kind of, it wasn't really blood, it was syrup, but it was sort of like a black syrup. And he had that applied to his head by the makeup artist. Well, if the shot didn't go well, then basically you've got to redo everything again, all of the makeup.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
Everything's a risk. That is why the lower budget you go, there are shots that don't always look amazing because there are different factors. You can't reshoot stuff,
Yeah, and
and you do kind of need more time and budget for that.
yeah, and getting the continuity right of it too.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. I do tend to like assign I usually have photographers and stuff on my films, and I'll maybe give one of them a bit of a continuity role as well, just to make sure between scenes that everything is kept the same. But you can't always do that. I mean, usually on like a very small independent production, you've got people doing multiple jobs, so it's quite hard to keep track of everything, and people are working like super hard and working in not particularly nice conditions a lot of the time, cold,
Mhm.
wet,
Mhm.
outside. Um, yeah, it can be tricky.
I think I asked earlier and we never got around to it. Is there any artist that anytime that you're making something, you sort of always have to give a little nod to? They always show up in whatever art that you're making?
Yeah, nobody specifically,
Yeah.
but for Salient Minus 10, there is a bit of a Kubrick influence there.
Yeah.
You'll see if you look at the font, it's the same as one of his films. It might have been 2001, I think. Um, and obviously, using the Barbican, which is quite a retro looking building in London, was quite Kubrick in the way it looks. I don't think he ever did shoot anything there, but it is quite Kubrick. So I did have a little bit of that going on. Obviously, as soon as you get into the woods, all that's lost. There's no real influences there. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's one person I take influences from or anything
Mhm.
like that. There are just sometimes, it can help you in the creative process when you look at other people's work. You do get inspired by
Right.
that, and so
Yeah.
things will, yeah, exactly. So things will naturally filter in, at some point, and that can be any kind of creative thing you're doing, really, not necessarily
Yeah, when you're
filmmaking.
just speaking of Kubrick, I mean, just looking at the blocking that he uses, just an amazing
Mm.
example of just being able to, like, I suppose, give the nod to somebody, but also really learn and use what they gave to us. The blocking for Clockwork
Mm.
Orange in some places just absolutely brilliant. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I've got a bit of a Clockwork Orange link for you. So Roy Scammell, who was the fight coordinator on my first film, Seize the Night, he was involved in the Clockwork Orange.
Oh
So
yeah.
there's a scene where they break into a house and they kind of do a dance as they're uh, torturing the woman.
Hmm.
He choreographed that.
Oh, that was
Yeah,
him.
so
Well, how
yeah.
about that? Because and then Malcolm McDowell said that he just improvised doing singing in the rain along with the dance. So
He might have influenced that. Yeah, he might have done that as well. But yeah, Roy was the choreographer for
that's
that film.
absolutely
So
brilliant because I mean, just the use of zoom in that entire
mm,
scene, uh, second to none. Kubrick is just a genius, I
mm,
swear. So you're nominated for the Rondo Hatton Award.
yes,
What's that about?
yeah. It kind of well, it's about classic horror.
Mm-hmm.
So hence the We Belong Dead column and stuff, kind of getting in there. But yeah, so I don't know how many years the Rondo has have been going on for. I assume it's like 20 something years. Um, but yeah, it's kind of awards anyone that's got something to do with horror that year or the previous year. The awards are always a year later.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be anything to do with magazine columns, magazine articles, magazine covers, films that have come out that year. And they don't have to be classic horror. They can actually be like modern horror as well.
Mm-hmm.
TV programs, podcasts, websites. No, the list is endless. There are so many different categories now, and people kind of vote in for those different categories, and yeah, and then there's an award for each category. So the person that runs that probably has quite a lot on their plate with that, and they do an awards ceremony, and yeah, the awards are really nice and they're really well respected. I saw Rob Zombie's Monsters is up for an award as well. So it's nice to be in something that he's in as well.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, some really really cool films, really cool magazines and stuff, and people nominated.
Just seems like you're going to be in some really cool company when you go to that. And I
Yeah.
think that everybody that's listening should go and vote, because I suppose this is the time where if you have any plugs, any websites, any addresses, now's the time.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Well, it'd be nice if people like my column and We Belong Dead. It'd be lovely to get a vote. I'm up against some real kind of hardcore talent there: Barbara Crampton, Kim Newman, and other people for that particular category. So I don't think I'll win, but it's always really great to be nominated. And obviously, if people did vote, then I might stand a chance of winning. Um, but yeah, in terms of if anyone wanted to check out any of my work or anything like that, if they just go to emmadark.com, there's all kinds of different links and stuff off there to YouTube, Vimeo, IMDb, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of that kind of stuff, really.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been so cool getting to talk to you and ask these questions and get a little bit of behind the scenes as to what's going on. That was just such a cool article.
Well, thanks very much for having me on, and good luck with your book, for your film. I listened to some of your music
Yeah.
as well, and I
Oh,
thought that was great.
well, thank
It
you
sort
so
of was
much.
very Tarantino. I
Oh,
thought like
well,
great in a Tarantino film.
thank you. Thank you. If you ever want to use any, just let me know.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I can't wait to have you on again so we can talk about what's going on with your next project you got going.
That'd be amazing.
Thank you
Thanks
so
very
much. It's been
much.
an absolute pleasure, Emma.
Thank you.
All right. That'll be all for today. Remember, peace, love throughout the world, and don't forget to rock and roll.